Christie Brinkley was once the shining icon who appeared to live a dream life. But what unfolds when that picture perfect world starts to crumble behind the smiles? How does a woman worshipped by the world conceal pain, deception, and the exhausting price of perfection? Step inside as we reveal the dark side of stardom that Christie Brinkley could never outrun. Fame's glittering cage, endorsements, and public persona. Christie Brinkley's fame was not only built on magazine covers and swimsuit shoots. What truly cemented her place in popular culture was her long and successful run as the face of major advertising campaigns. Among these, her work with CoverGirl remains one of the most remarkable partnerships in modeling history. For more than 20 years, she was the smiling image associated with the cosmetics brand. This was not just an achievement in modeling, but a cultural milestone. Very few models have held contracts that lasted so long, and Brinkley became a symbol of beauty that seemed to never fade. Being the face of CoverGirl meant her image was everywhere. Billboards carried her smile, television ads showed her glow, and magazines regularly featured her as the standard of freshness and health. She became an advertisement, not just for makeup, but for an entire lifestyle. Her look was bright, approachable, and trustworthy, making consumers feel connected to her in a way that went beyond fashion. It was not simply about selling products, it was about selling the idea that Christie Brinkley represented. Her influence expanded well beyond that single contract. She appeared on the covers of countless magazines, from high fashion to mainstream publications, and each cover only deepened her position as one of the most recognized faces of her generation. Fashion campaigns, international advertisements, and product endorsements followed her everywhere. She became a global sensation. Admired in different parts of the world for the same reason, she embodied a kind of beauty that was both glamorous and familiar. The commercial success of these campaigns also highlighted her unique place in the industry. Many models rise quickly but fade just as fast, replaced by the next new face. Brinkley managed to defy that cycle. Her career showed remarkable longevity, a quality that few of her peers could claim. The brands she worked with trusted that her appeal would last, and they were correct. For decades, she represented reliability and consistency, something rare in a business often obsessed with change. As her image spread, another label began to attach itself to her: ageless beauty. The public began to see her not just as a successful model, but as a woman who seemed untouched by time. Photographers, magazines, and advertisers all promoted this idea, turning Brinkley into more than a model. She became a symbol of eternal youth. While this title was flattering on the surface, it also created an invisible cage. Being admired for never changing meant she was constantly expected to remain the same. The idea of agelessness carried heavy pressure. Every time she stepped in front of a camera, there was an unspoken demand that she look flawless, and the public grew accustomed to seeing her as perfect. This expectation did not allow space for the natural process of aging or the struggles that every human being faces.
I have to say, you are the definition of aging sexily and aging gracefully. Because, first of all, you just turned 71 this year.
Yeah.
You turned 71. That's right. That's right.
The label of ageless beauty became as much a burden as it was a compliment. Behind the smile that charmed millions was the reality of maintaining an image under constant watch. Brinkley had to work harder than most people could imagine to meet the standards set for her. Diet, fitness, skincare, and lifestyle choices were all part of the effort to remain camera-ready at all times. Even the slightest change in her appearance could invite commentary. Living under such a spotlight meant that her personal life was never truly separate from her public role. She could not simply be Christie, she had to be Christie Brinkley, the idealized figure that the world expected to see. This ongoing need to maintain perfection made her success a double-edged sword. On one side, she enjoyed fame, wealth, and influence. She had opportunities that were the dream of many. On the other side, she lived with the constant demand to be flawless. Every smile in an advertisement carried the weight of expectation. Every campaign reminded her that she was not only representing a product, but also carrying the image of timeless beauty that people projected onto her. Now, aside the challenges associated with her career, how was her personal life? Was it the opposite of her public life? The high-profile marriages and public scrutiny Christie Brinkley's career was filled with dazzling achievements. But for many years, the attention she received was less about her modeling success and more about her personal life. Her marriages became front-page stories, often overshadowing her professional accomplishments. Each relationship carried its own excitement, drama, and heartbreak, and because she was a global celebrity, nothing remained private. What might have been personal experiences for others became public spectacles for her, magnified by fame and constant media interest. Her first marriage was to French artist Jean-François Allot. The relationship began when she was still building her modeling career, and it seemed like a creative pairing. He worked in the art world, and she had once studied painting herself. On the surface, they appeared to share common ground. Yet the marriage eventually ended, and although it was relatively quiet compared to what would follow, it set the stage for a pattern in Brinkley's life. Her personal relationships becoming tied to her image in ways that were difficult to control. The marriage that truly captured the world's attention came next, when Christie Brinkley married musician Billy Joel. Their romance seemed like a fairy tale. Joel was one of the most famous singer-songwriters of the time, and Brinkley was the supermodel everyone admired. Together, they became one of the most glamorous couples of the decade. The media followed them everywhere, and their marriage was celebrated as a union of music and beauty. Christie became more than just Joel's partner, she became his muse. She appeared in the video for his song Uptown Girl, and the connection between the two was cemented in the minds of millions of fans. To the public, they represented the perfect celebrity couple, embodying success, creativity, and charm. Yet behind the glittering image, the relationship had challenges. Eventually, the marriage ended, but the fascination with their time together never faded. Even years later, the cultural memory of Christie Brinkley as Billy Joel's muse remained strong. After her marriage to Joel, Brinkley entered into another high-profile relationship with real estate developer Richard Taubman. Their marriage was short-lived, and it attracted significant attention due to its quick rise and fall. The combination of sudden passion and equally sudden separation fueled gossip pages and kept her name in the headlines, often for reasons unrelated to her modeling or business work. Her next marriage to architect Peter Cook became one of the most scrutinized chapters of her personal life. At first, the relationship seemed steady, and the couple appeared to enjoy a family-oriented lifestyle. However, when their marriage unraveled, it turned into a highly publicized divorce.
Inked million-dollar beauty deals for decades now. Well, now she's an author as well, sharing her story in a deeply personal new memoir called Appropriately.
Details about Cook's behavior dominated tabloids, and Brinkley once again found herself at the center of unwanted attention. The courtroom became as much of a stage as the runway once had been, and every detail was reported as though it were a part of a public drama. Across all of these relationships, one common theme followed her: the media's obsession with her personal life. No matter how successful she was as a model, actress, or entrepreneur, headlines often focused on her marriages and divorces. This constant scrutiny created a narrative that Christie Brinkley was unlucky in love. It became a label that was repeated in articles and gossip columns, shaping the way the public viewed her. Instead of being remembered only as one of the most successful models in history, she was often described through the lens of her relationships. The emotional toll of such exposure cannot be ignored. While most people can process heartbreak privately, Brinkley had to endure hers under the spotlight. Every split, every court case, and every rumor was analyzed by millions. For her, personal struggles became public entertainment, and the pain of private disappointment was magnified by the constant coverage. Fame had given her opportunities beyond imagination, but it also stripped away the privacy needed to heal. These marriages show the double-edged nature of fame. On one side, it allowed Christie Brinkley to enjoy experiences that connected her to music, art, and successful people from different industries. On the other side, it ensured that her most intimate struggles became part of a public narrative. For every photograph of her smiling on a magazine cover, there was an article dissecting her relationships. The contrast between public image and private pain could not have been sharper. Trials, accidents, and the dark side of perfection. For Christie Brinkley, the image most people held in their minds was one of effortless beauty and endless energy. She was seen as the golden girl who seemed to have everything. Yet behind that polished image, she experienced moments of real danger and near tragedy. Her life included close encounters with death that reminded her and the world that fame and beauty do not shield anyone from fear or suffering. One of the most frightening moments came in the early 1990s when she was involved in a helicopter crash in Colorado. She had been taking part in a ski trip, and the helicopter she boarded to reach the mountains went down unexpectedly. For anyone, such an accident would be terrifying. But for someone constantly under the spotlight, the story quickly became national news. Reports of the crash spread, and her survival was treated as a dramatic miracle. The experience was more than just a headline. It was a traumatic brush with death that stayed with her. As if one life-threatening event were not enough, another came years later on the slopes during a skiing accident. Brinkley was no stranger to outdoor sports, and skiing was one of her passions. But on this occasion, what should have been a joyful day turned into a frightening ordeal when she was seriously injured. Accidents like this serve as a harsh reminder that even the most glamorous lives carry risk. For Christie, it meant enduring physical pain, medical treatment, and the long road of recovery while the public watched from the outside. The emotional aftermath of these experiences left a lasting impact. Surviving a helicopter crash and facing a dangerous skiing injury were not things anyone could easily forget. Beyond the physical recovery, there was the mental weight of confronting mortality in such dramatic ways. These events shook the illusion that her life was free of hardship. Instead of being protected by fame, she was reminded of how fragile life could be. The paradox of Christie Brinkley's journey is striking. On one hand, she was seen as someone blessed with beauty, wealth, and good fortune. On the other, she was confronted with situations that showed how quickly all of that could be threatened. Surviving such accidents might have seemed like proof of resilience, but they also brought emotional scars that fame only made harder to heal. Where most people could process their fear quietly, Christie had to do it while the world analyzed every detail. The media played a major role in shaping how these events were remembered. News outlets presented her survival as both a story of fragility and strength. She was portrayed as delicate because of the risks she had faced, but also resilient because she had overcome them. This dual image became part of her public persona. Once again, her private reality was turned into a cultural story, and while it highlighted her courage, it also left little space for the vulnerability she surely felt. What made this even more difficult was the pressure to continue looking perfect through it all. Even while coping with trauma, Christie Brinkley was still expected to appear smiling on magazine covers and advertisements. The demand to embody beauty and grace at all times clashed with the reality of her personal struggles. For her, there was no option to step away from the spotlight. Every appearance became another reminder that her image of perfection had to be maintained, even when life had shaken her to the core. These trials show the hidden challenges behind the life of a supermodel. To the public, Christie Brinkley was always shining, but in truth. So what made Christine's story more heartbreaking? The sudden rise to fame. Christie Brinkley's rise to fame was not the result of years of chasing modeling agencies or carefully planning a career in the fashion industry. It began with a chance encounter that completely transformed the life of a young woman who had been living quietly as an art student in Paris. When Brinkley first moved to Paris, her focus was not on fashion. She was deeply interested in art and wanted to build her life around painting and creativity. She spent her days in the city surrounded by galleries, sketchbooks, and the world of European art. Modeling was not on her mind, and her daily routine was far from the glamorous lights of photo shoots or fashion runways. Yet destiny introduced her to a completely different path. Her discovery happened when an American photographer noticed her on the streets of Paris. Brinkley had a natural charm that was impossible to ignore. While many models of that era were celebrated for exotic or dramatic features, she stood out because of her approachable, girl-next-door beauty. Her smile was bright, her look was wholesome, and she radiated warmth that instantly drew people in. She represented something fresh, simple, and different from the high fashion trends dominating the modeling world at that time. This chance meeting led to her very first photo shoots. From the beginning, Christie Brinkley's unique presence in front of the camera set her apart. Unlike models who seemed distant or untouchable, her appeal was rooted in being relatable. Her early pictures reflected an ease that spoke to everyday women while still shining with glamour. This mix of accessibility and elegance was rare, and it quickly caught the attention of people in the fashion industry who were searching for new faces. Her early success grew faster than anyone could have predicted. Soon after her discovery, she began to appear in magazines, advertisements, and major brand campaigns. The modeling world embraced her as someone who represented not only beauty, but also trust and familiarity. This combination was particularly powerful for companies that wanted to connect with a broad audience. One of the most significant turning points was her long-standing association with CoverGirl. Becoming the face of the cosmetics brand gave her global recognition, and her image appeared on billboards, television, and in households across the United States and beyond. For many young women of that time, Christie Brinkley became the symbol of beauty that felt within reach. Her features reflected an American ideal that was easy to admire, and her photographs quickly became part of everyday culture. As her popularity increased, so did the number of offers. She began to work with magazines, fashion campaigns, and photographers who further expanded her reach. Each appearance strengthened her position in the modeling industry. What made this even more remarkable was the speed at which it all unfolded. In only a short span of time, she had gone from studying art in Paris to being one of the most recognized faces in modeling. The suddenness of this rise was both exciting and overwhelming. Fame rarely comes with preparation, and in Brinkley's case, it arrived almost overnight. She was pushed into an industry where every move was watched, every photograph was analyzed, and every appearance carried expectations. What had started as a simple opportunity became a whirlwind of work, travel, and constant exposure. The anonymity of her student days was gone, and in its place was a life where privacy became rare. One of the most defining moments of her early fame came through her work with Sports Illustrated. Brinkley made history as the first model to appear on the cover of the magazine's annual swimsuit issue 3 years in a row.
Sharing her story in a deeply personal new memoir called, appropriately, Uptown Girl. It's her own account of growing up in California, the ups and downs of life in the spotlight.
From 1979 to 1981, she graced the covers that became cultural events in themselves. The swimsuit issue was one of the most popular publications of the time, and appearing on it meant instant global recognition. To do so consecutively for 3 years established Brinkley as a phenomenon. The impact of these covers went beyond fashion. They turned her into the ultimate symbol of the all-American girl. She became the face of a cultural ideal that combined beauty, health, and a sunny personality. In many ways, she represented the dream image of American femininity at the time. Her presence suggested not just glamour, but also energy, optimism, and confidence. This ideal was appealing to millions of readers who saw her as both aspirational and relatable. However, being placed on such a pedestal came with its own challenges. The title of being the perfect woman was not an easy one to carry. Millions of people looked at Christie Brinkley and expected her to embody an image that was flawless. Every photograph reinforced the idea that she was the standard of beauty, and the public often forgot that behind the images was a real person. This pressure to maintain a perfect appearance added weight to her career. She was not only modeling clothes or appearing in ads, she was carrying the expectations of an entire generation. This period shaped the myth of Christie Brinkley as more than just a model. She became a cultural icon, someone whose face was instantly recognizable. Yet, with that recognition came a loss of control over how she was seen. While she enjoyed success and opportunities that most could only dream of, she also experienced the difficulty of having her identity tied to an image that the public demanded she uphold at all times. The suddenness of her fame meant that she had little time to adjust to this new reality. In examining her early rise, one can see the powerful mix of luck, timing, and personal qualities that built her career. The chance discovery on the streets of Paris was luck, but her ability to translate approachable beauty into universal appeal was entirely her own. Her early shoots captured something that audiences connected with, and brands quickly realized her potential. Once she was tied to CoverGirl and appeared on the Sports Illustrated covers, her path to global stardom was sealed. At the same time, the overwhelming pace of her fame was undeniable. For someone who never set out to be a model, stepping into a life of constant exposure was more than just a career change. Legal battles and public exposure. Christie Brinkley's story took a more painful turn when her private battles moved into the courtroom, becoming a subject of national attention. Among the most difficult chapters was her divorce from Peter Cook, a split that transformed from a deeply personal heartbreak into a public spectacle. What should have been handled quietly became one of the most talked about celebrity legal battles of its time, drawing enormous attention because of the details that spilled out for the world to see. For Christie, it was not only a matter of separation, but also a test of strength. as every detail of her pain was magnified by cameras, headlines, and judgment. The unraveling of her marriage to Peter Cook was intensified by the exposure of his affair, which quickly became tabloid fodder. What could have been a private wound between two people was instead dissected on talk shows, gossip columns, and television specials. Christie, who had long been admired for her radiant smile and image of perfection, suddenly found herself trapped in a storm of betrayal and humiliation played out on a global stage. The affair was not just an emotional blow, it was a reminder of how little privacy a woman in her position could truly have. Every new headline carried another reminder that her heartbreak was not her own to process in peace, but something the public consumed as entertainment. The legal battle itself was grueling. Custody of their children, financial arrangements, and accusations were all dragged into the open. Christie's greatest concern during this ordeal was protecting her children from the circus surrounding the case. Yet the more she tried to shield them, the more invasive the coverage seemed to become. Reporters followed her into court, photographers snapped pictures of her outside her home, and columnists speculated about her state of mind. What made it even harder was the contrast between the life she had to live in private and the image she was expected to maintain in public. She was still the glowing model, the charming public figure, and the woman whose face had sold dreams of beauty for decades. But behind that smile lay the reality of betrayal, anxiety, and the exhaustion of being forced to relive the pain under constant scrutiny. The trial exposed details of Peter Cook's behavior that were embarrassing and often cruelly sensationalized. Instead of handling sensitive issues with discretion, tabloids amplified them, ensuring that Christie had little escape from the humiliation. For a woman who had spent her life cultivating an image of grace, elegance, and positivity, this exposure created a sharp contrast between the Christie Brinkley admired on magazine covers and the Christie Brinkley struggling through one of the hardest chapters of her personal life. Through it all, she displayed a quiet kind of resilience. Even as cameras followed her into courtrooms and journalists speculated about her every move, she carried herself with composure. Yet this composure came at a cost. The effort of smiling for the cameras, of being gracious to the public, and of living up to the expectation of being unshakable while her personal world crumbled was an exhausting act. This duality, having to appear radiant while enduring betrayal, was one of the cruelest ironies of fame. Reinvention, ageless beauty, and the weight of expectation. As Christie Brinkley moved further into the later chapters of her life, many believed her story would fade into the background, remembered only through magazine covers and photographs that defined a golden era of modeling. Yet Christie refused to disappear. Instead, she reinvented herself again and again, showing the world that she was more than just a beautiful face. Her journey into acting, television, and even Broadway proved that she still had the spark to captivate audiences in new ways. When she took on roles, whether in small film appearances or as part of the Broadway hit Chicago, she showcased her ability to adapt and thrive in places where few expected her to succeed. It was a bold statement that she was not frozen in time as the blonde model from the 1980s, but a woman of many talents who could still command attention. But with reinvention came a different kind of spotlight. Christie was no longer simply celebrated as a model. She was held up as an example of ageless beauty. Every magazine profile, every television appearance, and every interview carried the same fascination. How could she look so youthful while the years kept moving forward? Media headlines often painted her as a woman who had discovered the secret to eternal youth. This admiration, while flattering on the surface, created its own heavy burden. It meant that Christie was constantly compared not to other women her age, but to her own younger self. The expectation that she remained flawless was relentless, leaving little room for the natural changes that time brings. As whispers of plastic surgery and cosmetic enhancements followed her, Christie was caught in an exhausting paradox. On one hand, she was praised for seeming untouched by age, while on the other, she was accused of working too hard to maintain her appearance. The speculation around her face and body became a public sport, as though the world believed it had the right to measure how she aged. Christie, who had once posed effortlessly under the camera's gaze, now faced the scrutiny of aging in the public eye, where every wrinkle, every change was magnified into a story. Still, her fame was not just about her looks. Christie was also deeply defined by her role as a mother. She poured her energy into raising her 3 children, Alexa Ray Joel, Jack Brinkley Cook and Sailor Brinkley Cook, while living with the challenge of knowing that her celebrity status would always affect their lives. Alexa Ray, her daughter with Billy Joel, inherited the artistic spirit of her father and the determination of her mother, yet she struggled with the weight of fame that was not her own. Her battles with depression and the constant comparisons to both her parents left her searching for her own place in the world. Christie stood by her through these difficult moments, but there was an unspoken pain in knowing that the spotlight she had lived under had partly shaped her daughter's struggles. Jack, her son from her marriage to Richard Taubman but later adopted by Peter Cook, grew up under quieter circumstances, but still carried the name that drew attention. He pursued a career in